Happy Thursday to you. I'm Jen Yates. You are locked on to Jyneration Nation on LRS102.com, The Walrus. We are broadcasting live from the Launch Louisville studios, and I am so pumped to get today's show off the ground because I am joined by drummer extraordinaire Dave Beck. How are you doing, sir?
I'm fine, Jen. Thank you very much for having me today.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to have you on the show because I don't know you a whole lot, but the one thing I love about this show is I get to interview all these awesome musicians, and I get to learn their stories because every musician has one.
Well, a lot of the guys around town know me mostly because I worked in the stores. I worked at Far Out Music and at Mom's Music, and that's really where I met most of the guys around town, not so much as a player.
Yeah, well, I worked for Marvin myself. Actually, Max hired me back when they were on stilts.
Yep, me too.
And yeah, and Max, actually, I just talked to him yesterday. He's going to be in on the show here in a couple weeks. So
he's a great guy to have. I was there on stilts for 6 years.
Yeah, how did I miss you then? It's crazy. We were kind of in and out, in passing probably, and then I was with them when they moved it over to the Melwood Art Center in that area. Off of Melwood Avenue, and and then just left probably within the past 2 to 3 years. So
you came just after me.
Okay.
I was just gone from there. We'd done a ton of clinics and had a fabulous time there. Marvin was actually one of my early idols.
Yeah,
I used to go see. I used
Yeah.
to go see Soul Incorporated when he's about 5 years older than me, I guess, and now he's of course one of my very dearest and best friends. And
yeah, Marvin's an awesome man. He was in week 1 with us. He was kind enough to come down here, and we broadcast from the old Guild Theater building, and he was telling me that upstairs in the 60s and 70s, he used to play down here with like every major band that would come through would come here, and this was like a mini palace back in the day, so.
Marvin loves history. He knows more about music in this town than just about anybody.
As
you undoubtedly know, he has all the tapes down there from Sambo when he was cutting every single day.
Yeah.
And he's a great guy to know all about these places.
Yeah, he's a walking encyclopedia of Louisville history and music and just music in general. I call him the Hal Blaine of Louisville.
Indeed.
Yeah, because he's exactly like that dude. He's recorded with everybody. He's toured. His story is amazing too. How Dick Clark just called him up and he quit his job that day and took off on tour, and I don't know, I just always look up to him. I think he's one of the best people I know.
Me too.
And my father was a drummer. I am from Lake Cumberland area, Adair County, and my dad used to come up here and follow Soul Incorporated. So
what's your dad's name?
His name is Bobby Yates.
I don't know. I thought it might be. There's a Pat Yates around town that plays drums.
Well, I'm not kin to anybody in Louisville that I know of.
Okay.
I moved here in '99. And I moved here for media. I was working in television for a long time, and I did radio for a long time before that. Running Greg Martin from the Kentucky Headhunters Blues show for a while in my 19s, somewhere around in there. But yeah, my dad was a drummer. He put me on a kit when I was a very young kid, and I have been rocking ever since, So it was kind of in my blood too. But my dad was a big fan of Marvin and Soul Incorporated, and he played with a lot of the early guys from Exile before they were Exile. Toured with a guy named Johnny Pierce for a long time, and the Dawn Breakers, and all kinds of cool bands from South Central Kentucky. But he was rocking Kentucky, when he was really young.
Looks like he passed it on pretty well, kid.
Yeah.
I've been watching you for a couple of years now, and you've got a whole lot going on. It's amazing, actually.
Thank you. Yeah, and we're going to actually have a call in here in just a few minutes from a lady. I'm going to be featured in a documentary film on women drum set players that's going to premiere all over the world in September in theaters. It's a 2-hour feature film, and it basically focuses on, are there differences in gender when you're playing drums? And there's a lot of very famous drummers, guy drummers included, in this documentary. Todd Schuckerman from Styx, the drummer for Chicago, not the original one, but the one that's on tour.
Trissimbaton.
Yes, he's in there. There's a lot of they go to NAMM, they follow around, they talk to all kinds of drummers across the country about the differences in women and men playing drum sets. So that's going to be a very interesting, cool thing, and we're going to premiere it in Nashville. They're going to roll out the red carpet. A Canadian filmmaker named Cindy Goldberg is going to be calling in here in a little bit to give us an update on that. So
I've been a big fan of women drummers for a while. Drummer World started featuring women drummers quite some time ago.
Yeah.
And I pay attention to Madel Cohen and Emmanuel Capulet and
Oh, yeah.
Hannah Welton.
She might be on my show, so stay tuned.
Hannah?
Emmanuel.
Oh, Emmanuel Capulet?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's pretty groovy.
I've gotten in contact with her, and you'll love this, although I kind of broke my heart, but I got a hold through some contacts to Viola Smith.
Oh.
Who is 107 years old and still drumming. And this book right here, we've got it up in the studio. It's called Women Drummers, A History from Rock and Jazz to Blues and Country. And it was the first book ever written on women drum set players. And that's yours truly right there on the cover with all my idols down there. I had no idea that was going to happen, but that book basically follows Viola Smith's career. And it follows women drummers from prehistoric times until current. And they pick 50 women drum set players to feature, and I'm one of the 50 that's featured there. So,
well, picture on the cover is pretty cool.
I know that's over in Indiana, believe it or not. A friend of mine, Steph Perry, who's my photographer and my best friend, and she's been photogging me for ever since my 20s. We took a drum set, went over to the old ammunitions plant over on the way to Charlestown.
I know right where it is.
Yeah, and just set up a drum set by the train tracks and in a field, and I just started wailing, and she just started shooting, and that's what we got.
Looks like you're rocking a 26-inch bass drum there.
It is a 26, yeah, with my cool little spiderweb logo that I made after a crop circle idea. But anyway, yes, we're going to have them calling in. Viola Smith is one of my favorites, and when I was growing up, there wasn't a whole lot of female drummers to be seen. So it was either, and I didn't know of Viola Smith yet. I knew of Karen Carpenter.
Sure.
And I knew of Sheila E. And then later on, when Lenny Kravitz broke with Cindy Blackman Santana, I knew of them, And then I would just kind of watch along the way. Then the Bangles, the Go-Go's, all those characters came out. We had Alice DeBurr from Fanny on here. She was in the first all-female band to get signed to Capitol Records or to a major record label in the 70s.
Yeah.
And they were kind of underground, but man, if you go back and watch those YouTube videos, she was amazing, man. She talked about hanging out with Mick Jagger, and Keith Moon covered some of her stuff, and she was talking about smoking hash with him. I mean, she had recorded at Apple Studios on Ringo's drums. I mean, she had done some really cool things back in the day,
That's amazing.
Yeah. So kudos to women drummers. We love that you love us.
Heck yeah, man.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you coming in today. So I want to kind of start by telling everybody kind of your background. How did you get started in drumming?
Just like almost everybody else my age, it was the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show that did it for me.
That's cool.
And my brother played the drums and had a kit, and so I was allowed to play them once in a while. But then he went in the Air Force, and he let me keep on playing. And one day I was at the swimming pool with my buddy Buzzy Wright and another one, Ray Chin, and we met each other, and one was a guitar player. Well, actually, they were both guitar players. And we decided to go home to my bedroom and play Gloria. And it all started there in 1965.
Wow. That was before I was born.
I know. By quite a lot.
Yeah. I was telling you, though, I wish I had been a child of that time period, because I do feel like musically it was so magical back then. And there's just something that everybody loves, and all the kids I teach, they want to learn that style, those 60s and 70s tracks. I mean, they still hold up.
I went to the Atlanta Pop Festival in 1969, and Zeppelin was there, and Spirit, and
wow.
It was Grand Funk Railroad's first gig.
Wow.
Everybody in the world was there, and life was never the same after that. And we had a band called The Indelibles, and then we turned into Street Noise, and that band is still going today. I'm not in it, but a bunch of really great guys from town, Dennis Kottner and Jim Flout is gone now, but they had a 2-drummer thing going on.
I love that.
Yeah, Dave Thomas played congas and percussion and sang, and Greg Henderson and Mark Decker and Billy Dolan. Anyway, those guys are a fantastic band if you ever get a chance to catch them. Mostly they only record now, but if they ever play out, you got to catch them.
I would love to do that. So we're going to have that call in here in a few minutes, and then we've got you for the whole full 2 hours, which is super awesome. Who were your main influences growing up, like that encouraged you? I know you said Marvin Maxwell, but on a national level, did you have anybody that you just listened to that you were just like, wow, that's what I want to do?
I tried to come up with a bit of a list in that regard, and it's so very difficult because there were so many.
Right.
But Richie Hayward with Little Feat was a big one.
Cool. They're coming here. Did you see they're going to be at the Palace soon?
I got my tickets already.
Good. I want to get tickets to that because I love Little Feat.
Oh, man. Well, Richie's gone now,
Yeah.
and Lowell, of course, is gone. But nevertheless, they're going to kill. I know they will.
Yeah.
They're
Did you know,
fantastic.
fun fact about Little Feat, that the Dixie Chicks named their band after Little Feat?
No.
Yeah.
The Dixie Chicken?
Yeah, after Dixie Chicken, and they get a little chicken foot tattooed on their ankle every time they win a Grammy, and it's after Little Feat and Dixie Chicken. How cool is that?
That's very, very cool.
Yeah, I saw an interview with them once, and I thought that's really interesting.
I saw they did a live take one time with Emmylou Harris and Bonnie Raitt. It
Oh
was
wow!
pretty awesome.
Well, you can't go wrong with those two.
But Allman Brothers, my buddy Buzz turned me on to the Allman Brothers early on, and we got into Tower Power. Of course, the Beatles, real
man.
heavy. The Kinks, the Animals, Foreigner,
All
Deep
the great,
Purple,
man.
Ian Pace,
Ian Pace, man. I just shared one of his videos. He's one of my all-time favorites.
Mitch Mitchell.
I have to tell you a funny story about that too. Louisville nicknamed me Bitch Mitchell, and everybody's like, isn't that a dig? And I'm like, hell no, it ain't. Oh wait, did I just cuss? Is hell even a cuss word? I don't even know. But no, because I was like, Mitch Mitchell was the drummer of
Jimi
Hendrix, and I'll take Bitch Mitchell. I consider the word bitch a complimentary term personally.
That's
Yeah.
all you, kid.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, very cool. So anyway, Dave Beck, I'm so happy to have you up in the studio today. We're going to take a really short break, and then we're going to check in with Cindy Goldberg, and you can sit in on that conversation because you would really dig her. She's a female drummer from Canada who got into it not too long ago, but has networked her way into filming all these chicks across the country. Drumming, and has put together a really awesome sneak. I just saw a sneak peek. They won't let me see the real thing yet, but the documentary is coming out soon.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, you will dig that. So I'm going to start it out with, we had a call in from Meatloaf. I thought that was interesting, but I think we should play some Meatloaf because, there's not much better. I love me some Meatloaf. I don't know about you.
I do. I do.
Me too. I like the theatrical part of Meatloaf. You're locked on to LRS102.com, Jyneration Nation. It's Meatloaf. Paradise by the Dashboard Lights. I'm like, Meatloaf, you don't need to sleep on it. Just say yes, dude. You know what I'm saying? Yep. You're locked on to Jyneration Nation, LRS102.com, The Walrus.
Do you all ever talk about Hits Like a Girl?
Oh, yes. Actually, the first year they did that, I got in that. And
I bet.
I forget what I got, but it was something, But anyway, yes, I'm always encouraging my young female students to be a part of that because it's a super great thing, too.
Well, it's coming on real strong, too.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure. I know it is.
Yeah, I just dig it. That's where I first learned about a lot of the up-and-coming girl drummers, and they're really strong, really strong.
Yeah.
I watch them because there's things they can do I can't do.
Same. I mean, there are 4-year-old kids doing stuff I can't do. I'm like,
Yeah, it's a strong case for reincarnation, I think.
yeah, exactly right. So, Dave, let's talk a little bit more about your career in music. So, you were born in Louisville?
Yes, in New Albany, actually.
In New Albany, cool.
I grew up in New Albany, and that's where all my friends were. And then after the band Street Noise that I was telling you about, I got in the Cumberlands. I got in that band. Marvin recommended me for the gig, and he told Harold Tom, who owned the band, that I could play anything.
Okay.
Well, that was an electric bluegrass band, and I didn't know
Electric
bluegrass music
bluegrass.
from a sheep's hind leg.
We call that newgrass where I'm from.
Well-
if it's electric and bluegrass or it's got drums in it, then
Yeah.
it's newgrass. Yeah.
Yes.
I grew up with a lot of bluegrass players in my family.
Well, I learned how to play it very, very quickly. We went on the road. The very first gig was 2 weeks on the road, and every single night I'd record the show and practice all day the next day, and actually ended up getting pretty good at it. There were some fabulous players in that band. Jeff Guernsey from around here,
Yeah.
world famous fiddle player, actually spent time with Vince Gill. And
Nice.
Ronnie Parton was a wonderful banjo player. Dave Cosson, Charlie Faught, Buzzy Wright. Harold and Betty Tom, of course. Tom Britt was in the band. Dave Seabolt played bass for a while. Anyway, did several TV shows and larger shows with those guys.
Yeah.
It was a very well-known band at the time.
Very cool. Well, I love bluegrass, and I think like some other styles of music, you have to almost be a virtuoso to play bluegrass. You have to be a fantastic player. Like, you can't be a sloppy bluegrass player.
Some of those guys that I just named are truly world-class players. They're awesome.
Yeah. One of the first concerts I ever went to, you ready for it? Ricky Skaggs.
Oh, my Lord. Yeah.
And I don't think he was with Kentucky Thunder then, but it was Ricky Skaggs, and I remember just being blown away. And I used to wear out his cassette tapes when I was a kid. I loved, Honey, Don't You Knock on That Door, or whatever that track was, and I just loved that bluegrass style. My grandmother played banjo, organ, and dulcimer. I have a cousin who majored in bluegrass playing on mandolin down in Texas, and Levelland, and I had just a lot of bluegrass, gospel and bluegrass players around me when I was a kid.
Banjo and mandolin are two instruments where you can't make a mistake very easily. It's going to be very, very obvious if you make a mistake.
Exactly, yeah. And my dad was the lone drummer. And we had a couple other drummers, like my uncle had played drums in the Army and such like that. But my dad was the rock and roller, you know what I mean? So I was pretty much birthed on like Hendrix and Cream and Zeppelin and Edgar Winters. And he loved Santana and his troupe, behind him. He also loved Gloria Estefan and the Miami Sound Machine.
Oh, yeah.
All the great drum groups, Chicago, he was a huge Chicago fan.
So as I wrote down Danny Serafine as a major influence, and he still is today. I think he's a fantastic educator as well.
Oh, yeah.
He's a good, great player.
And what's interesting about him is if you learn that 25 or 6/4 groove, that it seems so simple, but it's actually really not. But it's a really cool groove that he plays on that. I mean, I really loved Chicago in the earlier days. They got a little cheesy, a little poppy for me in the 80s, but
yeah, they sure did.
yeah, kind of like Jefferson Airplane. They kind of took the same route, what I mean?
Well, you got to make money.
Starship. Yeah, I understand that.
You got to make money, and you got to. Sometimes the record company has more to say about it than you do.
Yeah. What do you think about the state of record companies today? Because they're on a completely different level, I would think, than they were back in those days,
It's hardly existent from my purview. When I look around, I see guys, everybody's going to have to do things independently. Waiting on a record deal is something you'll be waiting forever for.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult to do. However, of course, in the day of the home studio and YouTube and the internet, I don't know any reason why anybody couldn't record whatever they want and get it out there as soon as they want to.
Yeah,
like
that's my theory. Yep, that's my theory. I've had a lot of creative artists in here, and I've always considered myself a creative artist. I mean, I'm a drummer, I'm a student of music first, a teacher second, But the one area that I really excel at and really love is I use my music for my therapy. So anytime I go through, my daily life and say I'm heartbroken, just as an example, usually the one thing that I do when that hits me is I sit in a room and I write. And I love to write lyrics and I love to create music and whatnot, and I have never ever really wanted a record label. I always thought, well, I'll just do it myself, because I had all these skills from media, from working in television and running soundboards and producing and directing things, and and then working in radio, getting good levels on audio, and all this stuff. And then finally I just was like, well, I'm not going to pay. I think not the first record I did, but one of the earlier records I did, we invested like $15,000, of our own money to get this produced. And
That's a lot of money.
It was, but I was looking at the producer going, well, I can do everything he can do. Why am I not doing this? I had the capability to do it. And so then I started collecting good mics and finding good rooms, and I had great equipment. I mean, I play Ludwig drums, vintage Ludwigs, you know what I mean? So if the equipment sounds good and you've got a good room and you've got a great mic, it's easy to do and get great levels out there. You know what I mean?
It's it's the future, of course. Back when I was very active, which was in the '80s, and then in the stores also. But all the guys that's when guys were doing 3 sessions a day. You know, Gad and Vinny and all those guys. And now, well, they may still be, but almost everybody now is doing a home studio thing. They'll even send drum tracks back and forth, of course, via email.
Yeah.
And the drummers will put their tracks on and send it back, and they just communicate like that.
I've done entire records without even being in the same room with people.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's kind of the future of it, yeah. I did a record before Hillbilly Swagger. I did my first electronic record called Welcome to the Queendom. And I was out in L.A. when we started writing it, and I did a collaboration with this lady named Renee Jansky, who is a vocal opera major from, Juilliard. And it was outside of her box. It was outside of my box. And I went down to Arkansas and set her up with a recording studio and showed her exactly how to work everything. And then I went back to Kentucky, and we would bounce ideas back and forth. And we literally did most of the recording that way. We also recorded some of it when I was out in L.A., and we put it out, not even having been in the same room, but maybe 2 weeks tops out of a year.
That's what's going on these days. Even with the major labels, I think that's the way a lot of stuff is happening.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting?
It is.
I just read an article the other day. It talked about the independent musician is where it's at right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just bought a little thing not long ago called an EAD 10. It's a Yamaha. Do you know what it is?
Yeah.
Okay, so you hook it to your bass drum, and it records, and it changes the whole kit. You can add reverb and delay and all the various effects.
Super
then you
cool.
can record yourself playing along with tracks that either you have created or from your phone or whatever.
Yeah.
You can even video yourself, and it's the greatest learning tool in the world. I love that thing.
Yeah. Say it one more time for our listeners.
It's an EAD 10 by Yamaha.
Yeah. I'm a big Yamaha fan. I like a lot of their stuff. I use most of their stands.
Yep.
I was going to ask you, what kind of kit do you play?
Well, I have a few.
Okay.
The top ones I have a Yamaha recording custom kit. It's
Cool.
a 10, 12, 14, 16 with a 22-inch kick and an 8-inch snare and a 6.5-inch. That's a wood snare that matches the kit. And then there's a brass snare. It's a 6.5.
Cool.
And then I have a Birch Custom Absolute kit. It's a 10, 12, 14, 20 with a 5.5-inch snare.
Oh, a 20-inch kick. That's cute.
And then the other kits I have are less expensive. Like, I'm in the band Moondance now, and most of our gigs are outdoors in the summertime, and so I take a much less expensive kit. I take a Gretsch Catalina kit.
I have a Gretsch Catalina kit, but I've got the Catalina Rock kit. That's that 26-inch kick you were talking about on that cover. Yeah.
Well, I'm playing an 18.
Yeah.
18-inch kick with a 12 and a 14 and a Superphonic snare, Ludwig 5x14.
I play a
Superphonic
Superphonic too, man. You cannot beat those snares. I love my Superphonic.
It sounds good everywhere we play.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most recorded snare drums in history, if I studied
exactly
correctly.
Right.
Yeah. And the only other piece of equipment I really want is a Black Beauty, because I've never had a Black Beauty. The Ludwig snare, I really want one. They're just a little too expensive for my taste.
I had a chrome over brass Superphonic, and I couldn't get a sound out of it to save my life. I finally sold it. I couldn't get it going on.
Yeah. I've never really enjoyed brass snares. I don't know why. I just never liked the sound of them. I always loved the metal snares. I've never even owned a wooden snare.
Well, I love the Yamaha brass snare that I have, but the Superphonic is just a go-to drum for everything. I like my wood drums, but I usually don't take them out.
Yeah. Talking about size of drums, so when I toured with Kelly Ritchie, I used my dad's first drum set because he was like, I really want you to tour with this, which was a 1960 silver sparkled Ludwig kit with a 26-inch kick. When I was growing up, we had a drum room right next to my bedroom, and he had, I don't know how many pieces technically, but it was literally like, I don't know, a 9 or 10 piece Ludwig silver sparkle kit from the 60s.
Double kick?
It had a double kick, 2 26s, but he also had like an 18 or a 20-inch kick too that you could convert. If you didn't want the big kicks, you could have the small one. But then it was like 2, 4, 6, at least 6 toms, and a snare. I'm gonna guess an 8 or 9 piece, drum set. And I would go in there and wail. And one of the first songs I ever learned was Frankenstein by Edgar Winter, because I love that double drum solo in the middle.
Concert toms?
Concert toms,
or double-headed drums.
Yeah. Concert toms, yeah.
I bet there was 10, 12, 14, 16, and then an 18-inch.
Probably. My dad's a collector, so he has multiple kits. He collects all that Roger Slingerland, mostly Ludwig. You would love this, Dave.
Yeah.
He's got a 3,000-year-old gong. that hung in the Shaolin Buddhist monk temples in Indonesia. And
Holy cow.
you talk about some spirits coming off of that thing. I mean, you can just, every time I videotape it, there's like orbs flying through my videos and stuff. It's very, I don't know what's attached to it, but if you hit that thing, it will, it'll vibrate your entire soul, basically.
Where are all these drums?
They're down in Adair County. I call it my dad's drumatorium. He's got literally his entire living room you can't even walk through for the percussion. He's got multiple different drum sets. He's just a collector, and he always has been. He is kind of a gearhead, He loves all that old stuff. And he grew up educating me on drums and how to take them apart and put heads on and, cymbals and just... he's got some very interesting things. But I toured with that 26-inch kick, so I carried that baby all the way across the United States and Canada. And then my kit that I generally play is a 70s Black Panther kit with the leather wrap, which sounds awesome.
Leather wrap?
Yeah, you haven't seen those?
No.
They're from the 70s. They have a black leather wrap on them. And evidently, one of the guys at Ludwig told me if you take off the leather wrap and there are eagles underneath it, it makes the kit a lot more valuable, but I don't want to take the wrap off, obviously.
When you said Black Panther, I thought you were talking about a Mapex kit.
No, I played Ludwig pretty much exclusively.
As long as I've been doing this, and it's a long time,
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I'll have to show you a picture. I also have the Blue Vista Light kit from the 70s, which I like to, I'll take that out if I'm doing outdoor shows, because I've had sound guys tell me for live sound outdoor, those kits just can't be beat,
That was Dave Williams' very first kit.
Yeah.
Blue Vista Light.
Yeah, we love Dave Williams. He's been up on the show, and I told him I want him to come back in. He's just he's also a walking encyclopedia of just all things drums and all things Louisville, and he just educates me on things that I had no idea about because I didn't move here until my 20s, so I've only been here 21 years, So
He's a beautiful man and a great player.
I know, and I love his hair.
Yeah.
He's got the best hair, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got pretty good hair.
Yeah, I always love it. And he's playing with Tiffany Lynn Puckett, who I got to play with on Sunday at She Castle, and she was just the sweetest thing. And we did some Harper Valley PTA, and, I grew up on a lot of that classic gold country.
I saw the video of that.
Yeah, it was so fun. Yeah. What a cool gig, right? I was like the luckiest chick in the world. I got to play with everybody.
That was cool.
Yeah, it was cool. I was exhausted, though, by the end of that day.
Well.
I played the Black Panthers, though, at that show.
I'd love to see those.
Yeah. So snare drum wise, though, Superphonic, I've got a 60s Superphonic. I've got a 60s Acrolite, which I also love.
That's a killer.
And I also have the Tivoli. The basically what it is it's the Vista Light series from the 70s, and it's the Rainbow Tequila Sunrise. Look.
Does it have lights in it?
It does have lights in it, yeah. And I've been like, it even has working lights in it, which is crazy. I don't have the entire kit, but I know those kits are worth a lot of money.
Yep.
And I wish I could find a home for it, maybe a kit out there that is missing that snare.
Call Don Bennett.
Don Bennett? Well,
you know who that is?
No, but hook it up after we're done off there, yeah. So, we haven't even talked about Bonham yet.
No. Well,
what's your thoughts on Bonham?
Well, he's one of those guys that you can't really. Who could figure that a guy like that could be that creative and that instrumental or that influential at such a young age, and then to die so tragically young? It's just astounding to think of what he might have accomplished. But many of like the very first song on the very first Led Zeppelin album, I think it's Communication Breakdown, and the very first lick right out of the gate, it just blows your mind. The guy is an astounding force of nature, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've read so many books on him, and I've got the one that his techs wrote, his drum techs, and they talk about every instrument, every kind of cymbals, every kind of drum he used on all the recordings, how he tuned them, and people are still trying to figure out how he played things exactly. I mean, there's so many people who have written books and notated out what he's doing, but I don't know that they're always perfect.
When the levee breaks, I think it's the most sampled drum lick there is in the world.
Yeah.
And how they got that, I've read all about it too. And I don't know that if you went that same place with the same mics and everything, you could still get the same sound.
Yeah.
It was
castle, right? They rented out a castle and put the mics really high.
Yeah, I think the drums were in the stairwell. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, but I've read that same thing though. I think in that book that he's got a book out called Drums of Thunder, and it's got him on the front, and it breaks down like most of the tracks from his texts that are still alive, talking about how how they recorded stuff. You know, I'm a major geek when it comes to that recording stuff. So,
Man, I saw them at the Atlanta Pop Festival in '69 when they very first came to the U.S. And I got to tell you, it was a life-changing experience. It truly was.
yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Man, I never got to see them, but I'm a huge fan, and I love everything he ever did. And like you said, I mean, to not really be that trained, and just some of the parts that he wrote are just mind-blowing. You know?
And considering how high he was most of the time.
Yeah, or drunk, right?
Yeah.
I also read that his symbol, you know, they all had symbols. I mean, not symbols as in crash symbols and a logo. Yeah, his logo is like the 3 rings, because I have a T-shirt with the 3 rings on it. And I read that he was sitting at a bar one night, and he had his beer, and he put them on the napkins, and it made that logo, and he was like, "That's gonna be my logo." You know,
That's my sign, baby.
that sounds about right, doesn't it? He was half lit, like you said.
It does.
Oh man, so it's awesome to have you in the show. I also wanted to ask you about, you know, do you and LRS go way back?
Well, I told you guys a little story earlier. I interviewed one time for LRS, and I hired a few artists to do some renderings of some ideas I had to be your marketing manager. And I went in for the interview, and whoever the program manager was at the time said, "Well, you know, man, you can have the gig if you want it, but what it really is driving a van around, hanging up a banner, and playing the radio."
I love that.
And so it really wasn't my cup of tea. I went off to do other things. Matter of fact, I might have gone to work at Mom's at that time.
Yeah, man, I loved my days at Mom's Music.
It was magical for me. Marvin has been a major influence in my life. Number one, for just how to be a good person. I have watched Marvin make decisions to do the right thing in the most difficult of circumstances you can imagine. And he always does the right thing. He's a true Christian man. And Beverly, of course, is an angel on this earth.
Yes, she is. You know, I told Marvin when he came up in here, I was like, I don't know how you got that lucky, man. But, you know, he told me the story about Dick Clark calling, and she had one in the belly, and, you know, Max was running around as a little kid. And he literally went back home and was like, "I've got to go on tour, see ya." And I was like, "And she stuck with you, man."
I know,
You know?
I know. She's really something else. A dear friend also. And she and my wife are very, very close.
Well,
Yeah.
that is awesome, man.
Yeah.
Dave, how you've been listening to LRS since when?
Oh, gosh. Since it began. Well, probably not 64. Probably since 69 or 70.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I mean, LRS is pretty historic for rock and roll and breaking rock and roll artists, and I used to work for them before they went under, so it's kind of cool to be back and help them, you know, kick it off again.
You know, they did a concert, I think it was in 2001. I was in a band, The Falcons, with John Dennison and Billy Rakes and Danny Darnell, Pete Dorton. And we played down on the river. They actually brought in the show 38 Special and Rare Earth, and we opened that show along with the band Munch. And I don't remember who the jock was at the time, but she really liked us. And I actually have a recording of that show at home. But it was a wonderful, wonderful time, and it was an LRS show right then. Yep.
Wow, that's super cool. Well, Dave, I appreciate you coming in today. We're going to spin some music and take a little break here. And I got all kinds of cool stuff queued up for us to jam out on. And I love some Neil Diamond, and this is one of my favorite tracks, so I'm going to spin it. Some Cherry Cherry.
Go get them.
Yeah, you're locked on to LRS102.com. It's David Bowie and Queen with Under Pressure. I always love that track. Oh yeah, let me actually turn your mic up.
That'd be a good idea.
Oh man, I've almost got through this week. I tell you what, I was exhausted by the start. After Sunday, I was very exhausted. So it's taken me a couple days to kind of get back in my routine of doing this show. That song, very famous for, you know, the lawsuit, obviously.
Yeah.
With Vanilla Ice.
Right.
Which always cracks me up because I will never forget that moment when they're interviewing Vanilla Ice about that track, and he's like, "No, theirs goes dun-na-na-na-na-na, but mine goes dun-na-na-na-na-na." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's the exact same thing, man."
Yeah, exactly.
Which cracked me up. Oh man, copyright laws and all that good stuff. They're all, you know, I've put out a lot of tracks in my day that cover other artists, and you've got to cover your behind and get those mechanical rights and do what you do, you know.
Do you do that?
Oh yeah, heck yeah, I've got to, because I ain't getting sued.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I'd rather, and I want the artist to get paid, you know, or I want the songwriter to get paid for
Right.
me using that sample, because I love to sample stuff. I had an older African lady that I took a hand drum clinic from tell me, if you want to do something awesome and you want to, try to establish yourself in the writing game, she said the key is take something old and make it new again.
Of course.
Is what she said. She said, therefore, you've already got the older audience who loved it. And then you're going to get expose the new kids to something that their parents love.
I thought one of the most creative things that ever happened was Run DMC and Aerosmith doing Walk This Way.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very, very cool. That broke through a big wall.
Yeah, and in fact, I read that the labels did that on purpose because they were trying to get Run DMC established, and that's back when the Beastie Boys were breaking. Hip-hop was really brand new, and they always do this. They always take an artist who is on top at the time, and then they're going to put whoever they want to try to break with them.
Sure.
Because I always say it's all about the collaboration in music, and it's the truth, It's about who you play with, and you can't just keep playing with the same people all the time. And I myself, in my career, have done that. I've moved through multiple people, because if the creativity magic isn't there for me, which is what I always look for, then I'm going to keep it rolling, because I really look for a creative spark and some sort of like spiritual energy when I'm playing with other people.
Yeah.
And it's really hard when you don't have that. So, I just don't want to waste time, because none of us know how much time we've got here. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly right.
Yeah. And I want to keep putting out original music, obviously, and I've always done that. So I'm always in search of a new artist to work with, some kind of creative collaboration, something to produce. I like to keep busy. I'm a busybody. I always have been.
I have a stepson. His name's Jeremy Smith, and he plays in Rusty Dimes in the Good Times Review. But prior to that band, that's a very, very good cover band. They're excellent. But before that, he was doing all original bands. And they had just a rough time. I mean, it was tough to make any money, tough to get gigs, and get a whole lot of exposure. And I just told him, I said, man, if you want to have a lot of fun, get in a cover band, because making original music is tough to do.
Yes, it is. Financially, it's very tough to do. Money-wise, covers are going to pay more bills, obviously, but they still don't pay very good.
No, they don't, but it's a
No.
lot of fun.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. That's what I do now in a band, Moon Dance.
Yeah.
And we play, Captain's Quarters and Kingfish and those kind of gigs.
Yeah.
Let me shout out to my guys. There's Dave Seeley and John Laswell and Danny Darnell and David Shapiro, and they're very dear friends, and we have a great time playing out in Louisville. And you can check out our website at moondanceky.com.
I love that. Wasn't that a Van Morrison track, Moondance?
It was, and that's the one song we don't do.
I needed ba-boom.
Yeah, we can do it if we or if somebody really wants it, but it's odd we don't do that tune.
Yeah, that's cool. I love a lot of Van Morrison stuff.
Me too.
Yeah, he was great. I can't remember. I had to do one. What's the one about love that he does that's so great? Oh, I can't remember the name of it. Anyway,
I'm drawing a blank. My favorite song of all time is a Van Morrison song, and it's the one you're thinking of, and I'm drawing a blank too.
I had to cover it with Chris Williamson, who is really famous in the female music scene. She had one of the first LGBT records out in, I think, the late 60s called Changer and the Changed.
Whoa.
And I got to play with her on stage, and man, that was the song we did, and I can't think of it, but it's something about love. We'll look it up. Somebody call in and let us know what it is. Something about love. Van Morrison, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah, it's one of my favorites too, and I always love that track Domino.
We do that tune,
cool.
and we do the proverbial brown-eyed girl.
Yeah. That's like a standard. Almost.
Everybody
Yeah.
loves that song.
Yeah, it's standard. It's up there with like Margaritaville and Mustang Sally. Those ones that just always go over. Play that funky music, always goes over. You know what I mean? They're
We do
just
that
those
too.
standards. Yeah.
Yep.
I used to love to cover Sweet Caroline too, because my sister's named Caroline, so I grew up singing that to her nonstop. And played that for a long time. I did the cover band scene for a long time, but I finally just realized that I took a nasty fall. I was telling you this, and I have some damage in my arm, and it's hard to feel my fingertips and stuff on my left hand side. So I just got to the point where I was like, you know what? I don't want to keep killing myself physically.
Right.
And unloading drums and packing up 300 pounds of equipment and vice versa all the time. when I can go out here and teach and in an hour make the same amount of money as sitting up and playing 5 hours.
You know, I'm very, very fortunate. I have a young man. His name's Donnie Highland. Donnie Arbuckle.
I love Donnie Highland.
Donnie
by the
Highland
way.
is-
We love Donnie Highland. I want to get him on the show too.
He came to mind because he's such a dear friend. But
Yeah.
Donnie Arbuckle takes care of my drums for me, and I'm so very, very fortunate to have him. He does a wonderful job and very reasonably priced.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. Oh, by the way,
Yes.
the Van Morrison song I was thinking of is "Someone Like You,"
Ah.
but I don't think that's the one.
That's not the
one.
one I'm thinking of, though.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to look it up, and then we'll report back on that because it is a beautiful love song,
Yep.
the one I'm talking about.
He's awesome.
Yes, and I can't believe, usually I can always think of songs, especially the ones I had to cover over the years.
Well, you're on the radio. So.
Yeah, I know, exactly. When you put me on the spot, I'm like, huh? I don't know. So I want to talk about some of the clinics that you have set in and done and witnessed. I mean, that's one of the coolest things I think about drummers is we can go to all these clinics, and I've done the same in the past and gotten some great ideas from, those clinics that moms would host or wherever, they're always having them all over the city. It seems like Mom's has them more than almost anybody, maybe Guitar Center. I don't even know if they do that. I don't know.
I don't think they do. And back in the day, we started it with Chester Thompson Clinic in 1984.
Wow.
And it was
I bet that was amazing.
It was big. It was big. And followed it up with, well, I'll just read them off and then we can talk about them if you want to. We had Phil Ehart and Dave Garibaldi, Steve Smith we had for 4 days.
Oh, wow.
He
And
did.
Dave Garibaldi. He's the Tower of Power
Yeah.
man. Oakland Stroke.
Yep.
Yep.
One of my favorite ones, I'll tell you, was a guy named Casey Sherrill. He's a professor at Berkeley now, and he came to town, and I didn't know Casey, and he's one of the kindest, most wonderful, understanding guys in the world, and very much a world-class player. This guy can play anything for anyone, and he sat down and played everything I'd ever wanted to know in my whole life.
Wow.
An amazing, amazing man. Kenny Arnold came to town for a few days.
One of my faves.
Yep, Tommy Aldrich.
Another one of my favorites.
We had Carmine and Vinny Appice on the same day, right up the road at Phoenix Hill,
That's wild.
and we were doing sound check, and I looked over the side, and Joey Kramer was standing there from Aerosmith. They were in town that night.
I love him too. I love them all.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of all drummers, anything drums.
We had Ed Soph, big jazz guy, and Sandy Gennaro was playing with Cyndi Lauper at the time, and we had him in as well. So we did a bunch of clinics, and almost always had the guys teach private lessons as well while they were here. And I continue to get feedback from my dear friends who came into the store and came into those days and had lessons, and it really was important to them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can only, man, I forget some of the names that I've actually studied under, but when they would have those clinics in at Mom's, and they still do them. So
Oh,
if
yeah.
you can attend those, go for it, because I think it's anytime you can get educated on your instrument, you need to do so. Because you can't always think that you know everything about your instrument, and I think music. I mean, you'll never know everything about music. That's the joy of it. You may know a million songs, but there's still a million more that you probably haven't played. And we were just kind of talking about that with the theater stuff and whatnot.
One of the things I learned when I saw guys like Casey and Steve Smith, I realized at that time, which I had stopped playing for a living at that time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
When my son was born, I realized I was going to have to do something else, and thank God I did. But I realized that it wouldn't have mattered if I'd have practiced 12 hours a day, 8 days a week. I was never going to be one of those guys. There really is a God-given gift, I think, at the core. That's just like Michael Jordan, as a basketball player. Yeah, that guy worked extremely hard to develop his craft, but I promise you, he had a gift from the beginning.
Yeah, a gift from God.
Yeah. For me, it never ever came easy, and everything I can do, I worked very, very hard to get. But those guys, man, they just take it to a level that is beyond even my comprehension.
Yeah.
I mean, Vinny plays things that I don't even understand.
Right.
A whole lot of guys don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a wonderful. He was very kind to me. He's a very nice man, and of course plays with everybody. But my role was otherwise. I mean, I play for fun, and I really have a great time playing rock and roll, and I can play that just fine. Yeah. But I was never going to be one of those world class guys like Steve Smith.
Yeah. I hear you. My goal was always to try. You know what I mean? To try. When I was younger, I was always like, I'm going to be a famous female drummer, and I just never gave up that dream, and I never had children, and I pursued it nonstop. That's literally all I've done, and Now, finally, in my 40s, it feels like, I'm getting a little bit of notoriety for all the hard work is finally paying off.
Look at everything you've done. My goodness, it's impressive. I mean, all the theater stuff and being a great reader and playing drums, and you've produced things as well.
Mm-hmm. I've produced at least probably 5 to 8, maybe 10 records in my day, you know what I mean? And I've always continually put out records and had 2 or 3 projects at once and did the cover band stuff and the theater stuff, and just...
And you have a radio show.
I know. And I have a radio show. A lot of people didn't know that about me. They thought I was a drummer, but I only pursued music in the past 10 years. I did media from 16 till 30. So
I'll be darned. I didn't know that.
That's what brought me to Louisville, is media. Yeah, I did. Well, it's a funny story, I'll tell you, because we're on air and we got plenty of time. I always credit Dolly Parton for my start in radio. And this is why in my little small town, we only had one radio station. Now they got more than one, but there was only one then. It was Classic Gold Country. And I was obsessed with Dolly Parton from the time I was young. I don't know why, I just loved her voice. So I would call up to the radio station as a kid and always request Dolly Parton. Skip to about... I'm 16 years old and I'm in high school, and I was always a very talkative kid.
No.
The whole Yateses are very... in fact, you can't get them off the phone. They love to talk, and I got the gift of gab, for sure. But yeah, so I ran into this lady. I'm talking to her, and she said, "Do you have a job yet?" And I said, "No, I just, I turned 16 whenever. I can't remember what, the exact details." But she said, "Here's my card. I own the local radio station." And she said, "You have a great voice, and I want you to come in and apply for a job." So I said, "A what?" And then I told her I was the kid that used to call in with Dolly Parton stuff, which she thought was awesome and remembered. And so I went to see her, and I didn't even fill out an application. She gave me a 7 to midnight radio show where it was a call-in, and people could call in, and it was all manual. I had to literally go turn on the transmitter out in a farm field with cows, we were in the middle of nowhere in Adair County up on 206, and I would just sit there and listen to all those old classic country tracks, which I still love to this day. And at one point, I was having to run an FM and an AM station. And we would have Christian artists on the AM station, like on Sundays and stuff like that. So I had to run, I had to mic them up and get them live on air. And most of them were no drums, just like guitars or banjos or whatever. Mm-hmm. And like 4-piece, quartets or whatever. And so I would do that, and then...
"Oh, brother, where art thou?"
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then from that, I ended up going over to the Big Dog in Camelsville, Kentucky, where I ran Greg Martin's Lowdown Hoedown, his blues show, and I also had another show called Southern Fried Friday Nights. So I did Friday and Saturday nights for a long time there. And then that resume work got me into television, where I worked for a WB Warner Brothers affiliate, and then they got bought out and they moved me to Louisville. So TV actually brought me here, where I was an on-air producer and director. I was behind the scenes, like running all the stuff that you saw when Dawson's Creek was out, and Charmed and Buffy and Seventh Heaven and all these really cool shows, Felicity, And so I did that for 4 to midnight for 21 until, 6 or 7 years later, and then they did a bunch of layoffs. I went back into radio. That's when I went to Radio 1 and was on LRS. And then LRS went under, and they put me on B96.5, which is the hip-hop station.
When were you on LRS?
My guess is like 2006, 2007, somewhere around in there. And then I ended up taking a media job in radio for political news, making a lot more money for Westwood One, but I actually really disliked that job because it wasn't about the music. I was more into radio for the music, and when it wasn't fun, then I didn't want to do it anymore. And I finally realized at age 30 that money was not as important to me as my time and doing something I loved. So I gave up pretty much. I got laid off with a nice severance, and I had been teaching music on the side for Maxwell at Mom's Music. And I just decided to pursue my love of music full time. So, and that's what I've done until I got this job again. So,
well, keep rocking, kid, because you got a lot going on. You're very, very creative and really driven, and it's something the world needs.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I try my best. You know what I mean? And
I can see that.
I do have a solo record on the way, though, called Herstory. So instead of history, it's Herstory. And it's basically like me doing hip hop, ripping everybody a new one. totally outside my box. But I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna say in my music things that I can't say in everyday life.
I was listening to Bougie on my out in the car right before you got here.
Was you really?
Yeah.
Have you seen the video to that?
Probably, but it's been a while.
Okay, well, that's me in a wedding dress. That's the first time I ever put on. I mean, now I've only been in I've never been a real feminine female in my day. I was always the tomboy, the country girl, out in the fields with the boys on motorcycles and chasing cows and fishing, and just I always liked the boy. I was always a tomboy, you know. I was a daddy's girl, and my dad was. You know, he was an oil well driller and a water well driller, and I was down in the trenches in the dirt. I just loved to be outside and get dirty and do all the things that girls were not supposed to do when I was a little kid. You know, my sister, the complete opposite. She was like the beauty pageant star and super feminine, you know, we're complete opposites. But anyway, I kept thinking, what can I do in my solo career that's going to make everybody's jaws drop? And one of my guys said, you should go real femme. Because nobody ever sees you that way. Right. And so I put on a wedding dress. I put on a short mini skirt with some big thigh-high boots and showed some skin, something I never do. And I played my own bougie female in my own video.
That's great.
Yeah. Sean Wallace was in here, and he was like, I didn't even realize until you just said that was you. And I was like, no, it was me. And behind the scenes, my friends that were filming that were laughing the whole time. They couldn't take me seriously at all. And I could not walk in them boots. You know, the video looks like I can, but the behind the scenes, I'm tripping all over the place. And, you know, it was totally out of my comfort zone. So I just wanted to do something wacky and outside of my box. And I love to create, so I don't like to create in a box. You know, I don't like to go, I'm just going to put out a blues record, or I'm going to put out a country record or rock record. I'm like, no, I'm all over the board. Whatever comes out of me, that's what you're going to get, because I don't like to have a box. I don't like to be confined to say, you know, if I want to cuss, I want to cuss. I want to just, you know, I express myself through my music, and I use it for my own therapy. So, you know, it is what it is.
Go get them, kid.
Yeah, I always like the creative side of music. It's always been my favorite. But as you were talking about earlier, not a lot of money in it.
Tough to find an audience. It really is.
It is. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, and that's why I think it's all about the collaboration. Because when I met Bev and we started collaborating, it was like boom, whole new audience. You know. And then all these people got turned on to me because of all the production work I did for her and all the songs we had written together. And, man, she was my musical soulmate, I felt like. You know, we just had that creative spark. We laughed so much. And I'm glad that I got her the last 6 years of her life before she died of cancer because, man, I mean, we laughed so hard. Every song we put out, we just thought was the funniest thing ever. You know, we were making puppet shows for videos, and yeah, there's a song out there called Clean Socks, and it's a puppet show, and everything in the puppet show is actually something that really happened in our lives. And we thought, we can't really talk about this in person or via social media, but what we can do is make a puppet show out of it. And that's what we did.
That's very creative. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I made that video for $100 in my kitchen, if you go watch it. And we made everything on small scales. We made our own little puppets. And the song is all about I'm wearing clean socks. It's about somebody being shady and not being truthful. And we're the ones wearing clean socks, but they're like the dirty sock kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
So in the song, and it also questions sexuality. Behind the scenes, it was written about someone who was not so forthcoming about their sexuality, and they didn't want anybody to know behind the scenes, which is fine, you know, but they were trying to mess with both of us. So we were like, we can't talk about this, but we'll do a puppet show and a song about it. So that's
you've been a great advocate for the LGBT community, and I think I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
That's really good.
You know what? I've been out since I was 17, almost 25 years now. A lot of people don't know. I keep meeting all these young kids, and they're like, you know, how long have you been out? Well, longer than you've been alive, kid. Trust me. Yeah. And I've always kind of, you know, I had a hard time figuring myself out. But once I did, I was out and about, and I did not care to put it out there. And I was out before Ellen. Can you believe that?
That's a long time ago.
I know. I love to say that, too. Listen to this. I was out before Ellen, Rosie O'Donnell. I'm trying to think of the big ones. George Michael, Barry Manilow. Like, I beat them all. Like, I don't know how, but they all were like, hush, 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 hush for a long time. And when everybody knew, but they just wouldn't talk openly about it. And I've never had a problem talking openly about, myself, because I know myself. I know what I like, and it's taken me a long time to figure out. So I figure the more I'm out and I talk about it, the easier it makes it for someone else who is struggling.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I was that kid too that went through those suicide, attempts and whatnot when I was younger, because I didn't really understand, this world, because I was so different. Talked about this on the show yesterday. Where I come from was a very small town. I was not very accepted where I came from. So when I came to Louisville, I was like, wow, there are bars here that with people like me, so I could relate to that. And then I got picked up to go to LA. And the second night I'm in LA is when the Supreme Court passes LGBT gay marriage. And so I went to West Hollywood that night, WeHo, they call it, which is the gayest area in all of LA. And I was just like, wow, millions of people just like me. It was the mind-blowing experience for someone who had come from a small town of 3,600 people, where nobody could relate to me, pretty much, So it was I just like to use my voice for the community, because I do feel like, why lie? There's no reason to lie about who you are and what you love.
I tell you, I'm a straight guy, but it was a real eye-opener to me when all that went down, I'll tell you.
I bet. I still don't think if I ever get married, I go back and forth with the married thing. I'm 40 and I've never been married, never really wanted to be married. I love the idea of a partner, commitment, monogamy, that whole thing. But when it comes down to, do I need the government to sign a piece of paper to say that I can get married to this person? And if it goes haywire, because our divorce rates are extremely high, am I going to pay them thousands of dollars and have to split stuff and da-da-da-da? I just don't see the point in that. You know what I mean? But a commitment, yes. Yeah. Yes. A ring, yes. A party, yay. All that good stuff. Yeah. But I love it when straight people are like, well, I think gays should just be as miserable as we are, too. Yeah.
Well, I happen to be very happily married, but...
Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah,
I love that.
I'm lucky there.
Anybody who can find somebody to stick with them, especially a musician,
exactly,
hang with them, man. I'm telling you, because it's been pretty tough for me in that department.
Yeah, my wife is not from the music business. It's been a real eye-opener for her, but she's hanging with me every single day. She's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Is she a 9-to-5er? I'm just curious.
She's a teacher. Teaches at St. Mary Academy.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think... And this is just from my own personal experience, that when you're a musician and you're living the musician lifestyle, if you get with someone who is a regular 9-to-5er that does not understand the music business or why you do what you do or your love for music, it's incredibly hard to keep that alive.
Well, we've been together for 25 years. It's not something she can understand intrinsically, but she does get it, and she knows it's a very, very important for me. And so she supports me in that completely. She comes to the gigs, and she's wonderful.
Super cool. Does she miss gigs too?
Huh?
Does she miss gigs here and there, or is she one of those that, I was going to say, she doesn't come to every
I
gig.
don't push it at all. I mean, if you want to go, that's great, and if not, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
But I've got a beautiful drum room at the house, and I can practice any time of the day or night. It's a really good situation.
Well, she sounds awesome. You need to hang on to that one.
No kidding.
I'm telling you. No kidding. Right? Yeah. I always love it. I've struggled in my past with, people don't understand why you're coming home so late, why you do what you do. We do what we do because we love it. Because trust me, if we didn't love it, we would not be out here putting the wear and tear on our body physically. We would not be dragging around drum boxes that have 200 pounds worth of stands in it, or paying people to do it and getting up there and just using all this energy, all the time. And I've just always had a drive because I loved it.
It's vital for my mental health. If I don't do it, I've got a problem. Yeah, it's really important.
Stuart Copeland from The Police that says, musicians or drummers do what we do because when we don't do it, we go crazy.
That's right.
And it is good for your mental health. And drumming is the one thing that I turn to when I get up, when I go through, a bad time here in this physical realm. I mean, if I go through a heartbreak, I want to get behind my drums or write. If I'm angry, I want to go beat the crap out of my drums. If I just use it for my personal mental health too, and my therapy.
I get that. I absolutely understand that. But I've never been, that hasn't done it for me. Me, it's more of a subtle and soulful, mellow thing. As a matter of fact, more technical and as opposed to slamming. I
Yeah.
mean, I do
Oh,
slam,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
like
yeah.
to slam,
Yeah,
but
of
really,
course.
it's more of a get in there and groove it out.
Yeah, I hear you. It wasn't until Girlfriend that I really, I mean, in all these musicals, you have to watch dynamics and stuff like that too, but Girlfriend seemed more than any other musical that I've been in to be as, I mean, we had to play underneath, like underscore, basically. So you're playing, that means you're playing while they're talking.
Oh,
So you have to play very quiet so that you don't cover up what the storyline is saying in the theater piece, right? And I remember, and Vicki Randall gave me some amazing, compliments on my dynamic playing because she was like, "Gosh, there were times that you were so quiet that I could hear you playing." But that was because that show went from the loudest of loud of rock and roll to the quietest of quiet, and so that I really had to watch my dynamics in that show, and I think it's super important to learn to play quiet.
it's hard to do. That's a great compliment.
Yeah. Oh, it was. Yeah. I've noticed like choke up under sticks. Do you know who Vicki Randall is, by the way?
Nope.
She was the first female drummer on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. She played conga, and she just stopped touring with Mavis Staples as her backup singer. All right, but she's also toured with Whitney Houston, Quincy Jones, Aretha Franklin. She's on Who's Zoomin' Who, Pink Cadillac, all those tracks. That's Vicki Randall on backing. On percussion and backing vocals, and she literally plays every instrument. I mean, immaculately. She also sings, and she has this hard rock band out in San Francisco called Skip the Needle. I'm gonna have her on my show, but if you read her resume, man, she has done some amazing things.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, I mean, if you can sing behind Aretha and Whitney and Quincy Jones and Mavis Staples, I think you might be all right.
Yeah,
You know
no
what I'm
kidding.
saying? Yeah. Oh yeah, and be on tracks. Every time I hear Pink Cadillac, I just think of, I'm like, oh, that's Vicki Randall, But anyway, for her to give me that compliment was incredibly awesome, and I got to play with her. She was my percussion player. I was a drum set player at Michigan Women's Music Festival, and we got to back all kinds of really cool artists from hip hop to country to rock and roll to pop, a little bit of everything. So I got to spend a lot of time with her, and it was super rad.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, well, Dave, we got a call in and a request to play some Rocky Horror. So I'm going to play some Rocky Horror because that's right up my alley, man.
I think I know who maybe did that.
Yeah, and by the way, I've played this show twice now in my day.
Great show.
Yeah, here's some Sweet Transvestite on LRS 102. Hey, Horror, I love that we got a request for that Sweet Transvestite here on LRS102.com, the Walrus Generation Nation. I was telling you, Dave, I've played that show twice now in theaters and in theater, yeah, for JCC, and I just love that show. I can play it from memory. It's just a really fun one. You've got a lot of scandally dressed people running around you at all times,
Yeah.
in garter belts and thigh highs and boots, and it's a rowdy show. It's so fun to play though.
Yeah.
And my favorite part, the callbacks, of course. We always did it with the callback, so the audience was always allowed to say whatever. There's the famous, So now they change every time, which is funny because originally when he comes out and he says hello, and the callback was or right before that, what's a famous song by Lionel Richie, and then he says hello. Now it's what's a famous Adele song? Hello. You know what I mean? It's funny how they change over time, and every night it'd be different and. Just rowdy and fun. It's a great show, man. I just love Tim Curry. I'm a sucker for a guy dressed like a girl for some reason.
I hear you.
I always have been, and I just loved that role, and I love that it's a cult classic,
I like to watch it every once in a while.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and
Fun
didn't the
stuff.
Vogue Theater used to do it all the time here? That was
Yeah,
a
and
thing,
people,
right?
let's have a toast, and they throw toast in the air. And
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love that. Let's have a toast, and they throw toast in it. You can't... How that musical became as famous as it is mind-blowing to me, and I think it's even mind-blowing to the people who were in the movie.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Tim Curry is one of my all-time favorite actors. I mean, I've just been in love with every role that he does. I just love, so.
Yep.
And the soundtrack. I mean, you can't go wrong with the Time Warp. It's so fun to play on drum set. Real high energy. Yeah. So anyway, I could talk about Rocky Horror all day, and I just posted on my social media. You can spend the night in the castle that Rocky Horror was filmed at.
That's incredible that it's still standing.
It is. Can you believe that?
What year was that? I mean, Susan Sarandon was in it, so it's not.
70s, maybe early 80s.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know, but yeah, a friend of mine came back and said, I actually spent the night at that castle on my honeymoon, and she, on her honeymoon, which cracks me up because of the show, because of the plot in Rocky Horror. Oh, man. I got to be on stage behind the scenes where they have the curtains, you know what I'm saying, and you see the shadow effects and the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, you know, to get to see it from that angle as opposed to the angle out front where the audience is seeing it is so funny. To get the lighting right and the shadows right, and, you know, it's just, I just love anything scandalous and rowdy, you know, and that's right up my alley there.
Getting to know you a little bit, Jen. You're kind of a crazy chick here, girl.
I'm slightly crazy, yeah. If you ask anybody in town, they're probably going to say, oh, I love her, but she's crazy, as, you know, as I'll get out.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But I own my crazy, at least, you know what I'm saying. But I mean well. But talking about theater, man, there's been so many great theater shows over the years. I've got a whole bucket list of ones I want to do. Hedwig's along the same line of that. It's more of a rock and roller. Jeff McAllister got to play that one when he was here at Actors Theater, and I hope it comes back around again because it made a comeback on Broadway with Neil Patrick Harris. Kind of a very similar kind of topic. You know, features men in female clothing. Oh, anyway, that's why I love theater because, again, theater, music, all the arts really, even if you're, you know, a painter or anything like that, you can do things in music and in theater that you would not necessarily be accepted in everyday life.
You know, theater people are have somewhat of a. There's a different thing. I've done a couple little shows way back, and it's different from the whole music crowd. You know, theater guys and girls have a different sort of a vibe going on with that whole thing. I have one friend who's really transitioned. That's Melissa Combs. You know Melissa, and she does both. You know, very well. And well accepted in both realms, but there's not that many people that do. If you're a theater person, that's usually what you do, and if you're a musician person, that's what you do. So
yeah. And I took them because my therapist said that I had a hard time staying present in just in my everyday activities. So she recommended that I start taking musicals because you have to pay attention. Because your music, a lot of those musicals, the music never stops and there's never like downtime for the musicians. They continue to play underscore while the people on stage are talking. Now, some of them have breaks, but not all of them. So she suggested that I take musicals for my attention span.
To be in the moment.
Yeah.
Because you're always in the future.
Kind of. Yeah, I kind of have always been more of a visionary and a futuristic type of thinker. You know what I mean?
I see that.
I like to try to think ahead or, you know. A lot of times I'll have these little psychic moments where I see something and then literally 5 years later they come into fruition, which is kind of interesting. You know, so anyway, enough about me. I'm going to get back to you.
Well, I was just about to say, I couldn't possibly be more different. I mean, most of my stuff is in the past. I mean, most of the music that I love that I wrote down thinking about coming in today is, you know, Tower of Power and Little Feat and Allman Brothers and all that sort of stuff.
All the greats.
But you are right. That was the heyday of music. For my world, you couldn't have come up at a better time for music. Well, and that music every bit of it holds up still today.
Sure does.
Whereas I have a tough time getting with the music of today.
Right. It's totally different.
Yeah, it really is. And it's been a difficult thing. However, my father was a big band guy. And I love big band. But imagine him hearing Jimi Hendrix for the first time or Led Zeppelin, and to him that stuff was just beyond him. It was noise, you know. It wasn't calm and smooth and real melodic. Well, it was melodic, but
right?
You know what I'm talking about,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
It was heavy.
It was heavy, right?
So,
they considered them like heavy metal back then.
Yeah,
you know, back in that day.
So the same for me. I mean, I came up on Zeppelin and Hendrix and Allman Brothers and Little Feat and that whole thing, but then my own son got into rap.
Yeah.
And it was just beyond me. I couldn't dig it. You know, I just couldn't get with it. But I have to respect that. I mean, you're kind of not supposed to dig the music of your father.
Right. You know, I had a lot of music classes in college. But one that I really loved was the history of rock and roll. And he specifically, my professor who I loved, talked about music. Basically, throughout time, we have always listened to what our parents listened to up until around the time period where you're talking about, like when the hip hop stuff started coming out. Then the kids started buying the music themselves,
Right.
and they weren't just listening to what their parents were listening to. You know, it's just the transition of music and how it went. Therefore, that's when we started having the Britney Spears and the Justin Biebers and all this. The music got more targeted to their audience and who was buying it, which were the kids, not the adults. So when's the last time you bought a CD?
Oh, well, I buy them fairly frequently, but I always buy old stuff.
Right. Well, that's cool. But you are, I mean, I can tell you of 100 people I've asked that are probably 40 and up, when's the last time you bought a song? And they cannot tell you the last time they bought music.
Well, it actually has been a while, but I would buy used stuff anyway because I'll buy like a third copy of Machine Head or Deep Purple and stuff.
Yeah,
like
I hear
that.
you. Yeah,
that's what I'm buying. So nothing current at all.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because I come up on bluegrass, gospel, country, old school country. My dad was the rock and roller like you were, the Hendrix, and he was always rocking that out. And then when CDs came around, we would go to pawn shops and we would buy every CD we can. And the cool thing about my dad was he didn't judge. He just loved all music. So when Grandmaster Flash dropped The Message, which was the first hip-hop record, I had that. I had DeBrat. I had Lil' Kim. I had all this stuff.
Wow.
He didn't even know what that was, but he was buying the CDs just because. And if it had, that's when they started putting the parental advisory things on. So if it had that, I was buying it because I liked anything dirty. You know what I mean? When you're a kid, I was a rebel. I liked anything I wasn't supposed to like, basically. But across the board, when it came to music, my parents just let me listen to whatever. And of course, the hair metal bands were coming out, the hair bands of, the 80s and 90s. I was an 80s kid. I was born in the 70s, but an 80s kid listening to music. Loved the 80s stuff. Loved the 90s. I was a huge classic rocker. I loved playing drums to that stuff. But for some reason, I was really drawn to the hip-hop and the rappy stuff. And this is really before rap ever came around. And then I lived through the Tupac and the Biggie and all that. And then, boom, it was all hip-hop. I had an artist in here the other day that was talking about what makes hip-hop and rap so magical is it usually takes out melody lines because usually those styles are all about the vocal and the drums. That's it. And a lot of them just sample things, right? So it takes out the tonality or the tone or the pitch of a melody line, which is always so important for the emotion of the song. So that's what kind of makes it magical. It takes that away, but you can still feel emotion. And these original guys, nowadays, not so much. But when The Message came out, they actually had a message. They were living on the streets. If you listen to Tupac, he's writing his life about living on the streets. And you can feel the emotion from his stuff because it's honest and it's raw. Nowadays, I feel like it's just all about strippers and money and cars and fancy stuff, and nobody really cares about any of that stuff. You know what I mean?
Actually, I'm afraid everybody cares about that
Well,
stuff.
the young ones do. The young ones buying it, and that's
do.
why, you've got a Cardi B at the top of the charts or whatever. Not saying she's not talented, but, I'm also not a big fan of the lip-syncing stuff. I think if you're going to... somebody
Sorry.
just... No, that's okay. I just saw...
I saw her in the window and my phone's hit the mic.
Every day we broadcast live from Broadway, so every day we have a big window here and somebody comes up and sticks their face in or tongue out or something, and I'm always like, somebody just scared the crap out of us. It was Ginger Moon who's on in the morning show. But anyway, it's a fascinating thing to see the history of music and how it's changed over time. And,
Yes.
But I will say this, I do have faith in our young ones because I teach a lot of young kids. And I always ask them, what kind of music do you listen to? And you would be very shocked to hear some of their answers today. It's not this current stuff that's on the radio. Yes, they're all familiar with Old Town Road and all that stuff, but what's even cooler is most of my kids are very familiar with Elvis, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin. I had a kid tell me the other day Hall & Oates was his favorite group. That gives me hope because I'm like, nowadays, because kids have YouTube and stuff like that, they can actually
Go see it.
They can know who a Buddy Rich is. They can watch it right there. You know what I mean? I didn't have that growing up. I'm sure you didn't have that growing up. We had to really, it wasn't until the internet came around that I even knew what half of these song lyrics were saying correctly, So I do have faith in our young ones. I do think rock and roll is going to make a comeback. I really do. I always have said that because it just is never going to get old. Rock and roll is so broad from the 60s until current rock and roll. And there's so many branches off of that. Progressive, classic rock, you've got punk rock, you've got metal now, you've got, all kinds of different. I'm a big fan of like the new wave era in the 80s and 90s that happened with like In Excess and The Cure and all those type of bands. And then, of course, it just branches off. There's so many different branches. So I think that these kids are really drawn to that, especially when they're learning an instrument like drum set or rhythm guitar, or electric guitar. I have an 18-year-old. He was wanting to learn AC/DC, and, that's their favorite style of music. So I do feel like, just from my own personal experience of teaching kids, asking them what they like, that style is never going to go out.
I was part of the very first rock school that was here in Louisville. It was myself and Wayne Young, actually.
Cool. I want Wayne on the show, by the way, yeah.
Yeah, he would be great to have.
I know. I'm going to get him in.
He was another idol in Soul Incorporated, but Marvin actually was the visionary of all that, but Wayne and I worked on it. But actually, all the clinics that we did and the rock school, that was all Marvin. It was because of Marvin and Bev that all that happened, of course.
Yeah.
But rock school was a fantastic idea to take a group of kids who'd never played anything before and put a bass player, guitar player, keyboard player, and a drummer together and have them play a song, do a concert play a couple songs within 6 weeks. It was amazing, and it worked beautifully. And I certainly hope they keep doing that.
Yeah, I want to give Marvin credit because he's pretty much the first guy who invented rock school.
Yeah, well,
a lot of people
Yamaha
don't realize that. Well, Yamaha did, right, but I mean, we were doing it here in Louisville before a lot of these other cities.
Oh, no doubt.
Even paid attention.
We were the very, very first, and then Yamaha stopped doing it, but Marvin kept it going, and thank God he did. Now he's got 400 students over there or something like that. A whole lot.
Yeah, they slam it.
I know you spend a lot of time there.
I spend every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes a lot of Saturdays there for at least 10 years, if not more, yeah. And I loved every second of it. I loved teaching. I don't know why I dropped out of music school because I did not think that I would be a great teacher. And then somehow, via a higher power, I ended up teaching. And then I found that I was really good with kids, and the way I look at it is I have a God-given gift, and I want to share it with those kids and give them the tools that I didn't necessarily have at their age. I didn't start playing Led Zeppelin until like my 20s. Some of these kids I've got are playing Zeppelin like at 10.
Right.
So I didn't learn some of these things until much later on. And I studied clarinet and saxophone before I really studied. I was playing drums on a drum set, but when it came to going into school and actually learning an instrument, they put me on clarinet, bass clarinet. Later on, I did a little stint with some bari sax and stuff like that, and eventually I ended up in the pit orchestra, or the pit of the marching band, so I was playing like timpanis and marimbas and all these really cool things and drum set, and so I felt like because of studying clarinet and whatnot that I missed out on a lot of the drum set stuff or the drumming stuff early on, reading wise and whatnot. And I like to give these kids those tools because that they are our future of music. And now that I'm a lot older, I look back and I'm looking at the LRS playlist, and I've got students in there that have bands that are out on tour now, and I'm like so proud of them.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I remember the first time I got to see a student I teach on stage. I bawled like a baby. I taught her "Sunshine of Your Love" by Cream, and the kid was like 7 or 8. Somewhere over in Indiana, they're on. I think it might have been a rock school stage, probably. And I'm just out there, and I put my glasses on, I'm bawling my eyes out, and I'm like, holy crap, I just taught that kid how to play "Sunshine of Your Love," and she just nailed it,
And good for her, because I have a hard time with that song. It's backwards, as you know.
It is. He likes to play the 1 and the 3.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so interesting.
I know.
Is most of us play the 2 and the 4 in rock and roll, and I wonder if he did that on purpose,
Oh, I guarantee it.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe just how he heard it, but...
And the little fills, the ba-da-da, you know what I'm talking about? All the little fills. It's just really those 2 parts. It's the 1 and the 3 hit accents, and then the...
Yeah, but I always come in backwards. I always come in on 2 and 4. I can't help it.
Yeah, that's one where if I'm playing, I got to really... Okay, there's my one. You know what I mean? And we were kind of talking about that earlier, about some of the drummers you love, that it's hard to find that, and... A lot of the drummers in here have talked about that, and I'm a huge fan of Tony Williams.
Yep.
Who is with Miles Davis, yeah.
Yep.
I just love to sit and watch his clinics, some of those clinics that he's still got online. I know he's passed now, but holy crap. He's just one of those drummers that I'm like, what is he doing?
He changed everything. I'll tell you another one that I didn't put on my list, but was Elvin Jones, because he's just so far over my head, I just can't really get there.
Yeah.
But Tony, I can at least, follow and dig what he's doing. He was an amazing man. Amazing.
Yeah. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I just wanted to make sure we got everything in that you wanted to talk about today. It's been such an honor to have you in. I love talking to a drummer. I can geek out all day.
This is another Marvin thing, but sure. Marvin is the shuffle king.
Oh, I agree. I call him the Shuffle King, too.
Yes. I mean, the guy can play a two-handed shuffle, it seems to come naturally to him. I've spent many, 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 many hours working on that, and I can't play it. I had to play one in front of him.
Yeah.
Not too awfully long ago. And even at this age, I was still like, oh, my, I got to play this in front of Marvin.
I want to interrupt real quick and tell you this. Sunday, I didn't know it, but Marvin showed up to She Castle. And I'm playing, and I'm looking out, and there's Marvin and Bev. And I was like, oh, great. Because I was having to play with Sherry Edwards.
Yep.
And I was having to play a song that Marvin was tracked on. That was a shuffle, and I'm like, oh, great. Hope he doesn't judge me. You know what I mean?
He won't.
He didn't. He actually gave me major props and said I had a great pocket, and he loved my playing and whatnot. He's really proud of me. But anyway, go ahead.
Well,
I totally know that feeling.
Even at this day, when his body is not necessarily in the best condition it's ever been in, he can still rock a shuffle because that soul is within him.
Yes,
and he can lay it down like nobody else. He's my idol and one of my best friends.
Mine too, man. Every day. It was such an honor to get to work at Mom's, and I mean, he wasn't in every day, but he was in probably 3 days a week or so. Yeah. And we'd always be talking, and I just love the drummer talk. He'd be like, "I like to do that left-handed paradiddle with the and he'd just show me stuff, and I'd be like, "Wow, that's fascinating." Ooh, I'm gonna have to try that one. But
he can play it quietly too.
I know.
Yeah,
that shuffle you're talking about, some people call it the double shuffle, but I've also heard drummers call it the jazz shuffle because...
It is.
Yeah, the jazz shuffle utilizes both hands doing the same thing, and then you have to figure out how to get the backbeat with that rim shot.
Accent,
it's incredibly hard. In fact, I was teaching that not too long ago, and I still struggle with it myself, but I forced myself to play it just because... I was teaching a kid the intro to rock and roll yesterday. And the kid nailed it, actually, believe it or not. But I was telling him what makes it so interesting is not only does he start it on the and of 3, which Bonham loves to start stuff not on count 1, not anywhere around count 1. He loves to start a fill on an E or an or a, he's just really interesting that way. But not only that, but most times when we're drumming, it's single strokes back and forth. It's not both hands at the same time. And that's what makes it it makes it so fascinating to me. And I think that is one of the reasons it's so hard to learn. Because just like that double shuffle, it utilizes both hands doing the exact same patterns.
Right.
We're going right hand, left hand, not both. So it's I don't know, there's just something about that style that fascinates me. And I would love if Bonham was here today, to be like, where did you come up with that idea? Were you watching some other drummer and they were doing something similar to that and you just took it and applied it and made something creative out of it? It's just fascinating to me.
Well, in the halftime shuffle, of course, Bernard Purdy was probably I think he was the first.
He was. They call it the Purdy Shuffle.
Yeah, but then Fool in the Rain, I don't think they were calling it the Purdy Shuffle when Fool in the Rain came around.
No.
And the halftime shuffle is my passion.
Mine too, man. Yeah. That's an incredibly hard one too.
Yeah, I dig it.
I was going to tell you, it's kind of funny because it was, for a drummer to have their own beat named after them, I mean, it can't get any better than that. So the Purdy Shuffle, Bernard Purdy is one of my main top 5s.
Me too.
I love that man.
Me too.
And I try to steal his ideas for when I'm soloing, where he'll stop and be like, ow, ooh. He loves to make these sound effects while he's playing that are so funny. But he always looks so happy when he's doing it. But yeah, no, his ghost notes. So the halftime shuffle, which is fascinating. It's one of the most famous drum beats of all time. Nowadays, they're naming that Fool in the Rain, the Bonham Shuffle.
Well,
the Bonham halftime shuffle, and then you have the Jeff Porcaro shuffle from Rosanna, who he also credits Purdy from is it Asia? Still Babylon Sisters, right?
Well, it's that and Home at Last.
Yeah, Home at Last, right. So that he credits that, and then he credits Bonham with "Fool in the Rain," and it just seems like you can take that and do almost anything. And you know what blew my mind is when I realized that you can play a regular 4/4 like rock groove and then throw pieces of that in it,
Right.
and it makes it sound so cool. Jack White does that a lot. He's got a song called "Another Way to Die" that was a James Bond theme song with Alicia Keys.
Okay.
Listen to that. He plays drums on it and guitar. You know, Jack White is awesome. And
I was going to say it was probably Meg playing drums.
it wasn't Meg playing because I don't know if she could achieve
Yeah,
a
right.
halftime shuffle. No offense, Meg. I
Right.
love you.
No,
but
I get it.
I've seen her live, and I was just like, huh? You know, but anyway, and she's in the book, by the way, too, which I love. I have all the records, and I'm a big fan of Meg, but technique, she got a long way to go. She ain't been playing as long as some of the other girls that I know.
And he's
you know.
got her for that reason. She does what she does.
Which is genius, by the way.
I know.
But anyway, to finish up on that halftime shuffle, he utilizes in that track a basic rock and roll pattern, and then he'll go in and throw in pieces of the halftime shuffle, weave it in and out. And it was fascinating to me to hear him do that. So check that out. You would love that track.
I will do it.
Yeah, he does some really tasty licks in that.
There's a Death Cab for Cutie song, too.
I know which one you're talking about.
I'm drawing a blank.
I know what you're talking about, though, but it's also a halftime shuffle.
Oh, it's slow.
Yeah.
It's a good one for somebody to learn that lick.
Yeah. So anyway, Dave Beck, it's been awesome to have you in here. Drum educator, drummer extraordinaire, playing all around town. Moondance is your band if they want to follow those. You got any gigs you want to promote coming up or anything
Yeah, we're
cool?
playing Kingfish Friday night.
Kingfish
at
Friday
Zorn
night.
Avenue.
The Zorn side. Okay, so you're on the Louisville side on River Road there. Cool. So people can go Friday night. Check that out. What's that?
7 to 11.
7 to 11, yeah.
Easy gig.
Easy gig. Go check out Moondance. And it's been an honor having you on the show. I really appreciate you coming in today and talking drums with me and all kinds of cool stuff. And we'll have you back on.
I'm happy to get to know you, Jen. You're
Absolutely.
really an amazing person.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, man. And when that documentary comes out, you'll be the first one I send it to. You know what I'm saying?
I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm super pumped about that. So thank you again for coming on our show. I'm going to leave everybody with, are you familiar with Robert Plant and Alison Krauss's record?
I love Alison Krauss. I love Robert Plant, too.
Me too. I love both of them. And I grew up going to a lot of these earlier, these bluegrass festivals around Kentucky before she ever got famous. And she was, her and her Union Station band.
Right.
And she was severely overweight back then. I don't know if people remember, but she lost a ton of weight. Now she's like skinny as a rail, but
she did her live DVD at the Louisville Palace.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, man, you enjoy that Little Feat show. I'm going to be jealous. I really want to go to that. But I'm going to leave people with some Alison Krauss and Robert Plant's my favorite one off of the Raising Sand record. It's called Fortune Teller, and I love the lyrics to this one.
Thanks, Jen.
Hey, thank you, Dave Beck. I appreciate it. I'm Jen Yates. You're locked on to Jyneration Nation. I'll be back tomorrow with even better guests, and we're going to just keep it rocking here on LRS102.com.